The story behind Brooklyn Beckham's wedding wasn't just about fashion. It was about timing, expectations, and a decision that reportedly changed everything at the very last moment. For years, rumors suggested tension surrounding the wedding dress Nicola Peltz wore in 2022. Now, Brooklyn himself is offering a very different version of what happened, and it reframes the entire conversation. According to Brooklyn, the dress wasn't a simple, creative disagreement. It was canceled at the 11th hour, forcing a sudden change just days before the ceremony, and that single moment may help explain why a private family matter has quietly followed them ever since. To understand why this situation still matters today, it's important to start with what the public originally believed. When Brooklyn Beckham and Nicola Peltz married in April 2022, the focus was on elegance, scale, and legacy. The ceremony took place at Nicola's family estate in Palm Beach, Florida, and the event blended two globally recognized families, one from fashion and football, the other from business and film. Nicola walked down the aisle wearing a custom Valentino haute couture gown. At the time, the choice appeared straightforward. In an interview with Vogue, Nicola described the decision as a no-brainer, emphasizing the craftsmanship and vision behind the final dress. But almost immediately, speculation began to circulate. Public discussion suggested that Victoria Beckham, an established designer and Brooklyn's mother, had been expected to design Nicola's wedding dress, and that the decision not to wear her label indicated tension. Those early narratives framed the situation as a personal preference, or even a fashion snub. However, according to multiple interviews given later that year, both Nicola and Brooklyn denied any kind of conflict. Nicola explained that she had genuinely wanted to wear Victoria Beckham's design, but that logistical challenges made it impossible. She stated that Victoria's atelier ultimately could not complete the dress, and that there was no refusal or rejection involved on either side. Brooklyn echoed that explanation, publicly dismissing feud rumors and suggesting that media speculation had exaggerated a normal situation. At that point, the story seemed closed, but it wasn't. What changed years later? Fast forward to January 2026. Brooklyn Beckham posted a series of Instagram stories that dramatically shifted how the situation was perceived. For the first time, he directly addressed not only the wedding dress controversy, but his broader relationship with his parents. In those posts, Brooklyn alleged that his mother canceled making Nicola's wedding dress at the 11th hour, despite Nicola being excited and prepared to wear it. According to Brooklyn's account, the cancellation happened so late that Nicola was forced to urgently find an alternative, a detail that had never been part of the public narrative before. Importantly, Brooklyn framed this not as a misunderstanding, but as part of a longer pattern he claims existed even before the wedding. He wrote that his parents had been trying endlessly to ruin his relationship, and that the situation had not improved over time. This statement marked a clear departure from his earlier public stance. Until then, Brooklyn had consistently downplayed rumors and defended family unity. This time, however, the language was more direct and deeply personal. It's important to approach this carefully. Brooklyn's claims represent his personal account. They have not been independently verified, and David and Victoria Beckham have not publicly responded to these specific allegations. A representative for the Beckhams reportedly did not respond to media requests for comment following the Instagram posts. However, this was not the first time a revised version of events had surfaced. In May 2025, a family insider told People magazine that Victoria Beckham had initially agreed to make Nicola's wedding dress, but later informed Nicola's mother that she would no longer be doing so. According to that source, the reversal contributed to public misunderstandings, with Nicola being unfairly portrayed as difficult or ungrateful. The insider emphasized that Nicola had frequently supported Victoria Beckham's brand, attending fashion shows and wearing her designs to multiple high-profile events, including a film premiere. From that perspective, the issue was never about rejection, but about expectations that quietly shifted. Still, at the time, none of this was addressed directly by Brooklyn himself. Until now, the phrase "at the 11th hour" carries weight. In the context of a wedding of this scale, timing is not just emotional, it's logistical. Wedding gowns, especially custom couture pieces, are finalized months in advance. A last-minute cancellation doesn't just affect styling. It creates pressure, uncertainty, and stress during an already intense period. If Brooklyn's account is accurate, the decision would have left Nicola scrambling during what should have been a settled moment. That context adds nuance to why the situation may have felt more personal than it appeared from the outside. It also explains why, years later, the issue still resonates. Because this wasn't just about a dress, it was about trust. While the wedding dress became the most visible symbol of tension, Brooklyn's statements suggest the situation went far beyond fashion. In the same Instagram stories where he addressed the dress cancellation, Brooklyn made another claim that surprised many observers. He alleged that, in the period leading up to the wedding, his parents attempted to pressure him into signing away certain rights connected to his name. Brooklyn did not publicly provide documents or legal details, and no independent confirmation has been made. Because of that, these claims should be understood as his personal account rather than established fact. Still, the allegation added an entirely new layer to the conversation. Up until that point, public discussion focused on emotional distance, communication breakdowns, and perceived favoritism. Introducing legal and financial implications reframed the situation from a family disagreement into something potentially more complex. Importantly, Brooklyn did not describe this as a single conversation, but as part of what he portrayed as ongoing pressure surrounding the wedding. And once again, there has been no public response from David or Victoria Beckham addressing this specific claim. Silence, especially in high-profile families, often becomes part of the story itself. Following Brooklyn's posts, media outlets reached out to representatives for David and Victoria Beckham. According to publicly available reports, no comment was provided. This absence of a response has allowed multiple interpretations to exist at the same time. On one hand, silence can indicate a desire to keep family matters private. On the other, it can leave allegations uncontested in the public space. What's notable is that this isn't a case where both sides are actively engaging in public debate. So far, Brooklyn has spoken directly. His parents have not. That imbalance naturally shapes perception, not necessarily because one version is more accurate, but because it is the only version being actively voiced. And in digital culture, the first detailed narrative often becomes the dominant one. For years, headlines surrounding Brooklyn and Nicola followed a familiar pattern. They focused on rumored feuds, supposed personality clashes, and speculation about loyalty. According to a family insider quoted by People, Nicola was often portrayed unfairly, labeled as difficult or demanding, despite her consistent public support for Victoria Beckham's work. The insider claimed Nicola attended numerous Victoria Beckham fashion shows, wore her designs regularly, and never distanced herself from the brand. From that perspective, the narrative that Nicola refused to wear Victoria Beckham doesn't align with her public behavior. Instead, the insider suggested that once the dress plan fell through, a simplified version of the story took hold, one that was easier to explain, but less accurate. Brooklyn's recent comments appear to support that idea. By framing the dress issue as a last-minute cancellation rather than a stylistic choice, he challenges the foundation of years of speculation. For a long time, any suggestion of serious family distance remained subtle. That changed in 2025. When David Beckham celebrated his 50th birthday, Brooklyn and Nicola were notably absent from the festivities. The absence didn't go unnoticed. Soon after, a source close to the family told People that the relationship was strained, but not beyond repair. The same source emphasized that David and Victoria love Brooklyn deeply and remain emotionally available to him. However, the insider also said they were hurt and disappointed that Brooklyn was no longer actively involved in family life. That statement is important because it presents a very different emotional framing. From Brooklyn's perspective, he describes a pattern of interference. From his parents' alleged perspective, the distance feels like withdrawal. Two sides interpreting the same silence in completely different ways. According to sources with knowledge of the situation, David and Victoria have reportedly made repeated attempts to meet with Brooklyn and Nicola to talk things through. One source stated that these requests were intended to move the relationship forward and reduce tension. David Beckham has been described by insiders as deeply committed to his role as a father, with his children remaining central to his life. That includes Brooklyn, as well as his younger siblings Romeo, Cruz, and Harper. From that viewpoint, the estrangement is not rooted in indifference, but in unresolved conflict. However, reconciliation requires mutual willingness, and at this stage, it remains unclear whether both sides feel ready for the same conversation. This situation resonates far beyond celebrity culture. At its core, it reflects something many people recognize: how unresolved misunderstandings can quietly grow over time. What begins as a logistical issue can become symbolic. What remains unspoken can become heavier than what was said. And when public narratives take hold, they can complicate private efforts to repair relationships. Brooklyn's decision to speak now suggests that for him the silence had reached a breaking point. Whether his account will lead to dialogue or further distance remains to be seen, but it has undeniably changed how the story is understood. To understand why this conflict feels so deeply rooted, it helps to consider the environment Brooklyn Beckham grew up in. From a young age, Brooklyn's life unfolded under constant public attention. Every decision, from education to career choices, was observed, analyzed, and compared to the legacy of his parents. That kind of visibility creates expectations long before adulthood begins. In families with global recognition, personal milestones are rarely just personal. Weddings, careers, and even disagreements can become symbolic events, interpreted as statements rather than moments. In this context, a wedding dress is no longer simply a garment. It becomes a representation of unity, tradition, and public image. If expectations around that symbol were misaligned, disappointment could carry more emotional weight than anyone intended. And when communication breaks down under that pressure, misunderstandings can escalate quietly. Without a clear moment where everything visibly falls apart, one of the most challenging, the most aspects of high-profile families is the loss of privacy in moments that require it most. According to publicly available interviews, both Brooklyn and Nicola initially chose not to correct media speculation. At the time, that decision may have been made to protect family relationships, but leaving narratives uncontested can allow simplified versions of events to harden into perceived truth. Over time, those narratives can influence how people are treated, both online and offline. In Nicola's case, repeated headlines framed her as the source of tension, despite a lack of direct statements supporting that portrayal. From Brooklyn's recent comments, it appears that allowing those assumptions to persist may have caused long-term frustration. Speaking out years later may not have been about reopening old wounds, but about correcting the record, at least from his point of view. Why speak now? The timing of Brooklyn's posts raises an important question. Why address this now? One possible explanation lies in the accumulation of unresolved moments. By 2025, the estrangement had become visible. Absences were noted. Silence was interpreted. When a situation shifts from private to publicly observable, it can change how someone feels about staying quiet. Another factor may be emotional distance, reaching a point where clarification feels necessary, not for the public, but for personal closure. Brooklyn's language suggests a desire to explain his position rather than to escalate conflict. Notably, his statements focused on patterns rather than isolated incidents. That framing implies that, for him, the wedding was not the beginning, but a turning point. It's important to acknowledge that family conflicts rarely have a single, objective truth. Different experiences produce different realities. Brooklyn's account reflects how events felt to him. David and Victoria's silence leaves room for alternative interpretations that have not been publicly articulated. Neither perspective automatically invalidates the other. What often matters most in these situations is not intent, but impact. A decision made for practical reasons can still cause emotional harm if it's experienced as abandonment or rejection. And without direct communication, those perceptions can solidify. This is why reconciliation, when it happens, often requires revisiting not just what occurred, but how it was understood by everyone involved. Despite the public nature of this story, insiders continue to emphasize that the relationship is not beyond repair. Sources have stated that attempts at conversation have been made. That suggests the door remains open, even if it's not clear who will walk through it first. What's unresolved isn't just a disagreement over a dress or a wedding detail. It's a broader question of boundaries, autonomy, and evolving family roles. As children of famous parents grow into independent adults, those transitions can be especially complex, and sometimes the most significant conflicts arise not from hostility, but from mismatched expectations. When stories like this surface, it's easy to focus on individual moments, a dress, a post, a headline. But the real story here isn't about fashion or public statements. It's about how private relationships change under constant visibility. Brooklyn Beckham's comments don't offer a definitive conclusion. They offer perspective, his perspective, shaped by years of navigating adulthood while carrying a globally recognized name. At the same time, publicly available information suggests his parents continue to express love, concern, and a desire to reconnect. That contrast is what makes the situation complex, not dramatic. No clear villain, no simple resolution. Just people experiencing the same events through very different emotional lenses. What makes this story resonate is how familiar it feels. Many families experience moments where expectations clash, communication falters, and silence fills the gaps. In most cases, those moments remain private. Here they unfolded under public scrutiny, right, where narratives can solidify before conversations have a chance to happen. This situation highlights an important reality. Sometimes the most lasting conflicts aren't caused by a single action, but by what goes unresolved afterward. And sometimes speaking out isn't about creating division. It's about reclaiming one's own experience. As of now, there is no public indication of how or when this situation will be resolved. What remains clear is that the story is still unfolding. Whether reconciliation happens privately or not at all, the conversation has shifted from rumor to reflection. And that shift invites a broader question. How do families redefine boundaries when tradition, legacy, and independence collide? If you want to explore how public families navigate private conflict and how media narratives shape what we believe, the next video looks deeper into why silence often lasts longer than disagreement and what actually helps relationships move forward. That's where the story continues.